Hello out there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan, and we have a new intro, and I'm stoked about it. That's a nice little compilation that Pauline put together. Those of you that have been listening to the podcast for a while have definitely seen her around before. She and Max, who does photos for us, have kind of compiled some clips from different sports over the last year, so thought that was pretty cool. Let's start with basketball because we are in the midst of basketball season, but a little teaser. After we talk basketball, Alan got to meet with all of the transfers,
I think it's 21 was the number, including the preferred walk-ons, or Davis Bevel. Okay, I guess he's the only one, but
and we have some exclusive interview clips with each of those that we can discuss. And then later, for subscribers on GamecockScoop.com, you can view all 55 minutes of interviews, or you can listen to all 55 minutes of interviews. If you're a junkie like that, we'll have a private link for our subscribers later on GamecockScoop.com. Anyway, basketball.
42-3 is what we're up to now for the combined record.
I heard things are going pretty well. Finally, South Carolina gets a ranking, the men. So they come in at 15th this past Monday after wins over Kentucky and Tennessee, and then also Georgia, Ole Miss, Missouri.
To 6 in a row now. You can just name almost half the conference at this point.
Yeah, to throw that all in there. Really impressive win on the road at Georgia since we last spoke. That was a come from behind win. Obviously, Georgia beat you at home earlier in the season, so nice to kind of get that monkey off your back, and a 10-point win that really felt like it wasn't even that close. Really, by the end of the game, I felt like it was a pretty dominant performance in the second half for South Carolina.
Yeah, you got down 10 early in that game. Georgia was shooting the lights out the first 10, 12 minutes. I think they were like 7 for 10 on threes to start the game, and it's okay. Stay in the game long enough for the shooting to cool off, because it's going to eventually, but you can't be down 30 when it happens. So take the punch, stay in the game long enough for it to even out, and that's exactly what happened. We saw the 1-3-1 zone make a return. That was kind of a staple last year when this team had less talent on defense. They haven't really used it this year, but Lamont kind of busted that out against Athens, trying to break up the shooting a little bit. It worked really well. I think you got the athletes to kind of make that happen more this year. Zach Davis still at the head of that, but Colin Murray Boyles, BJ Mack kind of patrolling there. Mack in the back, obviously, as kind of the second one in that 1-3-1. I thought that worked really well. It's kind of the nice weapon you have. And then, which has been kind of my theme with this team, is you win different kind of games. You turn around 3 days later against a pretty good Ole Miss team, and you find a way to get that one done. Bit of a hairy second half. You had a 17-point lead go down to 3, but you made a couple plays late.
Yeah, I believe the two teams combined for like 4 points in the last 7 minutes, something like that.
It was not. It's probably not what James Naismith had in mind when he put up that peach basket. No.
Yeah, I read a stat where it was like they were 7 points away from the over with 7 minutes left and didn't hit
didn't
it.
Cash.
Yeah, if you're a degenerate, that probably was a bad time if you picked the over, because you probably were feeling pretty good about it with with half the second half to go.
Can we talk about the block herd around the world?
The block herd around the world. Yeah, so that's actually where I was going to go with it for both games, really, as we continue to see Colin Murray Boyles emerge as a key X factor on this team. Obviously, you were winning games without him as he kind of got up to speed, and now I think he's near probably that 100% mark. Although if we think back to off season, they actually said that he was pulling up and shooting a little bit more than he is even still right now. But nonetheless, he's making a huge impact felt. And the one that you're referring to, of course, is a block on a 7'3", 7'5" Ole Miss player.
Very sharp,
yeah, exactly. That had a opportunity to tie the game, or was it tie the game?
Tie or cut it to 1. I think they might have been down 3, but either way, he went up for a layup.
Final minute, right?
Like just
it more or less ended the game. And obviously, Colin Murray Boyles is tall. He's like what 6'7", 6'8", but he's not. He's not. He's not 7'5". So that was pretty crazy to see. If you haven't seen it already, it's posted all over Gamecock basketball, social media, and stuff. But yeah, what's your take, I guess, on Colin Murray Boyles, true freshman, and how he's kind of solidified his role through a little over halfway through the SEC schedule at this point?
Maybe this qualifies as a hot take, maybe it doesn't. I think he has the highest ceiling of anyone on the roster, which sounds a little weird. All right, you're looking at a guy like, established veterans, BJ Mack. What Talon Cooper can do. He's one of the best passers in the country. Meechie Johnson goes without saying. You watch Colin Murray Boyles, what he does on both ends, his basketball IQ, like that block, it's a freakish physical play, but also he steps out on a rotation immediately. Gray loses a cover. Max slides into Gray's spot. C&B has a presence of mind to get over to Max's spot quickly, make the block. The basketball IQ, the physicality inside, the awareness of everything. I like you said, if he starts pulling up and shooting, like I think that's an NBA player. Like I really, not now, maybe not as a true freshman now, but like I think it is, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, maybe doesn't quite have every aspect of his game polished yet, but like you said, I think the sky's the limit as far as the ceiling goes. And luckily, you probably have him for another couple of years as he develops.
Yeah, I thought Lamont. I can't remember which game it was after. Now it was one of the home games. Maybe the one they lost to Georgia, or maybe Missouri. Anyway, Lamont called, I think, Colin Murray Boyles like what an SEC athlete's supposed to look like. Like he said before he got to the SEC, when he was in Chattanooga, Wisconsin, he imagined SEC athletes. He pictured people like Colin Murray Boyles, and I can't argue with that.
Yeah, I think really when we look at this team now that we're to the point that we are in the season, some personalities have started to really solidify. And like you said, I think it's kind of a really balanced team, right? You think back to a Miles Studi having the swagger and confidence to finish off the game in Knoxville. You think of Colin Murray Boyles, who you just mentioned, with the IQ to kind of close things out against Ole Miss. The IQ and the physical gifts. I don't know if there's anyone else on the team.
No one else is blocking that shot
to that ball. Yeah. You have Talon Cooper, who has been clutch at various times throughout this stretch. Meechie Johnson maybe has taken a little bit more of a backseat than he was earlier in the season, but he's still hitting, threes at big times. And
assists too. He had a career high in assists on Tuesday against Ole Miss. He had 8.
Yeah, that's a good point. In front of his dad, I think he's for the first time all season as well. So that was pretty cool as well. But yeah, I mean, I haven't even mentioned everyone that's been contributing through this whole stretch. Josh Gray, I think, is playing some best ball of his career. It's just, it's been a really fun team to watch. You hope that they're not peaking too early and that they can keep this momentum going a month from now or whatever. But if they're playing like this, there's not a team in the country that I think would want to run into them right now.
I think that's kind of the way you got to look at it. You don't want to play them. They're tough. They're annoying defensively. They slow the game down. Maybe it's not the most attractive thing to watch, but it's still tough to play against. And looking ahead a little bit, tomorrow you are at home against Vanderbilt. That is 6-16 on the season. Vanderbilt, 202nd in Ken Palm right now. You would certainly imagine that would be a cleanup home win. And then you're heading to Auburn, which is probably the toughest building in the league to play in. They're undefeated at home this year. They're 42-2 at home the last 3 years. But you're tied with them in Alabama for the league lead right now. So assuming you handle business tomorrow against the last place team, you're going to Auburn with the league lead at stake.
Yeah, so that's actually where I wanted to go next. I mean, the end of the season stretch is pretty brutal. Let me just rattle them off real quick. So actually, tomorrow against Vanderbilt at home, I mean, you should win that one. There's really no upside to that game, even when you win.
That's a quad 4 game.
Yeah. But anyway, you should win that one. But then after that, you got to go to number 12 Auburn. You have LSU. You got to go back to Ole Miss, who you narrowly escaped there. You got to go to Texas A&M. You host Florida, who's playing pretty well, and then you have to host Tennessee again, which that could be huge depending on how the next few games play out. You both have 2 losses in the SEC right now, so I mean, you're going to be right on the cusp probably with Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, South Carolina, and it's kind of crazy that you're in that cluster of teams right now. But you play 2 of those teams down the stretch, several other tough games. Is there really a chance, you think, for South Carolina to take home a regular season SEC title after being picked last in the SEC preseason?
Sure, there's a chance. Hang on. I'm trying to think. Like, you have to say there's a chance because they're tied for it right now, and we're more than halfway through the league schedule, and we're going to be another game through it tomorrow, assuming they take care of Vanderbilt. If you had to throw a percent on it, that's kind of, I think, the better question. Like 20, 30 maybe. Like, I wouldn't say it's likely. I wouldn't pick it, but you're in with 3 other teams with 2 losses right now, and you're going to get a chance to play 2 of them. You start looking at the math, and it's like you probably need 14 wins to get there. Have a chance. You thinking maybe 6-2 in these last 8?
Yeah, that sounds about right. And it also depends on who those are, right? If Auburn and Tennessee are those
right,
those picks, then I mean you're gaining 2 games on each of them. But yeah, I think 20% sounds about right if you're picking them against a field. The question is there any one of those other teams between Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee that you would give a higher individual chance, I guess?
I haven't looked at all the schedules for the other 3.
Yeah.
But the fact that Auburn just doesn't lose home games kind of makes me lean to them. And we'll see what happens Wednesday night. But that makes me lean them, and they're playing pretty well. I don't know if you watched Wednesday. They put 99 points on Alabama, but they're playing pretty well right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the question, right? Can you slow them down? Obviously, you have slowed down pretty much everyone that you've played below their normal average. But we did see in that Alabama game, ironically enough, you didn't quite slow them down enough, and you are going to have to keep pace to some degree. If you can't keep pace, if you go through a cold stretch like they did in the second half against Ole Miss, you're not gutting one out like that, I don't think.
Nah. And that's going to be a hornet's nest. It's going to be a tough game. Speaking of tough games, I think we're about good on the men's now. You got to say what you wanted to say?
No, I mean, I believe you said Auburn is like 42 out of their last 2.
42-2 the last 3 years at home. Yeah.
Yeah, not 42 out of their last 2. 42-2 out of their last 44 at home. Yeah, it's going to be a really tough game. But at this point, given what has happened at this point in the season, I certainly don't think that it's one that you count out South Carolina. There's going to be a huge spotlight on that game from a national media perspective, and it should be really fun. Looking forward to it.
Speaking of huge spotlight, national media, tough game, all that stuff, it is UConn weekend, I guess, for the women's team. South Carolina women are 22-0 now. UConn is coming in here on Sunday for a nationally televised game, little Super Bowl Sunday action. Always a big deal. Always time. It's always a big game when UConn comes in. It feels a little less this year just because UConn's already got 4 losses, but it's still UConn. It's still the name. It's still Gino versus Dawn. You got any early thoughts on Sunday?
No, I mean, I think you pretty well covered it. Like you said, they're on a 3-game. UConn is on a 3-game winning streak, but they did lose to Notre Dame like a couple weeks ago. This is not the
not your father's UConn.
Not your father's UConn. Not our UConn, I guess, if we're thinking back to our childhood or whatever. But I still think that there's some things to be concerned about. Obviously, Camila Cardoso is playing with the Brazilian national team right now. And then we found out yesterday that Sanaya Ja is on a hiatus with the team.
They didn't use the word suspension, but they called it conduct detrimental to the team in an official statement like half an hour before tip last night.
Yeah, not ideal. So I still think probably if you're, betting on this or whatever, South Carolina still got the depth and more the talent advantage against UConn. But definitely something to watch. I mean, just changing up your lineup, changing up the rotation and stuff is always a little bit weird. They played pretty well last night, I thought. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell when the talent level is so much lower. I don't know. How do you feel about, I guess, the way that they've been rotating with Cardoso out?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing, especially not that she was playing a ton, but Ja is also a big. So you're pretty much down to 4 bigs and really 3 because Sakima Walker's barely played. You're pretty much just down to Chloe Kitts, Ashlyn Watkins, and Sanaya Fagan. You start Watkins and Fagan or Watkins and Kitts last night. Kitts answers the bell, career high in blocks. She had 5 last night. Watkins has started 3 games now. Has got 2 double-doubles. I think the main thing you worry about, all 3 can play well. All 3. I think Don was talking last night. I got a quote on my Twitter about how well Watkins and Kitts kind of defend together, kind of work off each other. The foul situation, just the general rotation, you just don't have enough bodies for foul trouble. And if it's a tightly officiated game, if one of those 3 bigs gets too early, anything like that, UConn's not super deep either. They only go 8 or 9 usually as well, but you just don't have the depth in your front court right now. I think you're going to take some shots is I guess what I'm getting at. I don't know if you can just count on dominating inside the way you normally would Sunday. You're going to need a big Full Wiley game, a big Powell game. Raven Johnson was big last year against UConn. You're going to need that again, I think.
I was about to say one, I guess, positive is we saw Full Wiley get one of her biggest amount of minutes of the season last night, and she came through
19 points. Yeah,
I would say. So I mean, it may look a little different, but I think that they are set up in a way to win games in multiple ways, maybe even more so than they were last season. Obviously, I don't think that they are quite as dominant as they were last season, which is something that we've talked about throughout this season. But it does seem like they at least have more pivot options if the more interior bang around style isn't working for them.
Yeah, I think they got to try to run UConn off the floor, honestly, just kind of the way I set up this game and what UConn does well. And I do think UConn's going to have Aaliyah Edwards is still really good. I think she put 25 on South Carolina in that game up there last year. It's going to be tough inside, but I don't think it's, infallible or impossible there. But they're going to have to run them off the floor. I think transition's key. This is a game where you need this, everything we talked about, right? Speed, faster, getting up and down, all the things that are different about this team. I think this is kind of the spot where you have to flex it a little bit.
Yeah, looking forward to that. So that's Sunday afternoon. We'll have full coverage on every game.
You're early to your Super Bowl party, just hang out, watch South Carolina, UConn, and roll right into a Deebo Samuel Super Bowl.
I think that sounds like a great Sunday. So check that out on GamecockScoop.com. We will have a live thread for premium subscribers like we do for every major sporting event for South Carolina. Let's talk a little bit of football. So late last night, actually during the women's basketball game, there was a couple of rumors on Twitter and then some sources from some of the national writers like Brent Murphy that Justin Stepp was going to Illinois to be wide receiver coach. Then they announced, the school themselves announced it a little bit later. We have an article up on the site if you want to go check out a little bit more about that. I actually spoke with the Illinois rival site last night and gave them a quick interview of kind of what to expect with Stepp. Seems to me like this is pretty cut and dry. He didn't really want to coach tight ends, and he is now coaching wide receivers at Illinois. He had a couple of ties there from the past. We were talking about this a little bit on text last night. Like, this is a tough one, I think, because I think Justin Stepp is a very talented coach. I think the fan base really likes him. Obviously, he's got South Carolina ties, played at Furman, and he, without a doubt, I think has a lot of skills in developing wide receivers. I mean, you look at some of the names in his history. You got Treylon Burks, obviously Xavier Legette. He developed into
Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, exactly. Xavier Legette, we're expecting to be a day 2 draft pick this year or around there. So, I mean, it's really tough because I think you're losing someone that's really good at developing players, has good relationship with players. I see him still tweeting at Cortland Sutton and some other NFL guys. Jalen Brooks,
the Cowboys
that he kind of developed. So I think from that standpoint, it's a loss. I also think from a recruiting standpoint, it just never quite got his feet under him here, which is kind of surprising because he had a good history of recruiting heading into here. As someone that follows it pretty closely, like there was almost always a circumstance or like a narrative that I could have painted for why they finished second for this kid or another. Like it wasn't like he was completely whiffing all the time. They were finishing second very often. And then I think he maybe landed his best high school class this past season with
Mazeo Bennett in there.
Bennett and DeBron Gatling, who was an Under Armour All-American. You also can't discount what he's done in the portal. He's found some good talent in the portal, developed those guys as well. Antoine Wells, obviously, being the most notable. I guess, yeah. What's your take here? How big of a loss is this? Obviously, we'll have a little bit better idea of that once they name the tight end coach. But it seems like this really got set in motion when Beamer went out and got James Coley. Do you think that trade-off is worth it? Maybe too early to tell.
I think for that part of the question, yes, because you don't know who's replacing Step. I think that's just, you kind of got to start there. Like right now, you're down on the assistant coach again. I think the bigger takeaway, almost not so much with the Step thing, is that, one way or another, last year doesn't go the way you want it to go. You finished 5-7. Shane Beamer, does what all coaches do, talks about that's unacceptable. We got to make changes, and not entirely from him, pretty much just Montario Hardesty from him, but Jody Wright's gone. Justin Stepp's gone. Pete Lembo's gone. You're turning over pretty much half your staff in one off season. It's 4 out of 10 assistants once they hire a new tight ends coach. And that's not normal. That doesn't usually happen when you don't replace a head coach or even a coordinator. Well, I guess you replace special teams coordinator, but you're turning over half a coaching staff in one off season. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think there's a way to go about that where it can be good just from a shakeup perspective after last year, but that's what I can't get away from, especially on offense. You're going into next year with a new running backs coach, a new receivers coach, and a new tight ends coach.
Yeah. Although at the same time, I think you could say the running back recruiting and the wide receiver recruiting.
I think we talked about the Montario move already. And even before the move was made, that kind of needed to happen. It's just different. And you're not going to have returns on that, obviously, for at least a year in a recruiting cycle, but even just in general, how it looks on the field and practice, how players respond, it's half a staff, man. Like that's not nothing, or almost half.
Yeah. And we've seen that throughout Beamer's time here. He doesn't seem to throw assistants under the bus and straight up fire them. He kind of helps them or encourages them to look elsewhere. I don't know how much. I mean, I think you were trying to hold on to Lembo. I think you probably were hoping to hold on to Step, but you felt like Coley was a trade up, so you went and got him. And if Step wanted to stay in coach tight ends, you would have been happy about it, but obviously he didn't. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting, I guess, his style there. It doesn't seem like it's going to change. It's been this way for the last several years. I think he probably intentionally was looking for a different offensive coordinator for one reason or another last year, and waited until like Satterfield was able to find a job elsewhere.
Like mid-December, that hire ends up happening.
So, this is kind of following some of those same trends. I don't think it's a bad thing that the coaching staff is shaking up, but I do think it's going to be interesting how it all plays out. And I do think if James Coley comes in and, locks down some stud 2025 wide receivers, it's very quickly going to be smoothed over.
I think that's the whole thing. I think we've talked about it with pretty much everything, whether it's, to find some joy or whatever, but winning solves everything. People don't like it when you're losing. No one's going to care about 4 assistants changing if you go 8-4 this fall and beat Clemson again. Like, I think that's just kind of what it is. I know that's a cop-out answer. It's maybe not what people want to hear in February, but if you land recruits and you start winning games, no one's going to care. And if not, it's going to look like a mess. But we'll see who the tight ends coach is, and I think you go from there.
Yeah. At the same time, I do understand if there's anyone in the fan base today that's a little bit sad about it. I think I fall in that camp a little bit. I mean, Justin Stepp won the Burroughs Award 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I think he's a talented guy. I think he's still got a lot of ceiling left in his coaching career ahead of him. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out here for a myriad of reasons. But let's talk a little bit about some of the other shakeups on South Carolina's team heading into 2024. So yesterday, you got to meet in like a gaggle format with every transfer pretty much that's coming into the program. If you're not sure who all that is, we have a helpful link on GamecockScoop.com. If you go to the transfers page, you can see all of that. We've also been slowly doing film rooms on each of those. Perry McCarty's been doing a good job.
Yeah, they got a good one on Jawan Howell, the running back from South Carolina State, up this morning, if you're subscribed.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like I said, for premium subscribers, I'm going to have every minute of all of those interviews posted later today. That's like 50 minutes of content, so enjoy that. But let's go through a couple of these that I thought were a little bit notable. I have a couple of clips here and there. So the first one is from Pitt linebacker Bengali Kamara. Let me share this real quick. I just like uploaded it as a video, but it's not going to show anything. So if you're watching in video format, just use your ears.
Podcasting is a visual medium, as I always say.
Anyway, so Bengali Kamara on, I guess, how he arrived here. And a lot of what we're going to talk about, I think, is at least defensively, is the scheme going into next year, which he hits on a little bit too. So here you go.
Being that we switched schemes and personnel and stuff like that, that's obviously interesting because of how much speed we have on the defense. So it was definitely intriguing to see the 3-3. I ran some of that at Pitt, so it was nice.
What do you like about the 3-3-5? What does that kind of do for your game?
Just help with packages, being able to blitz different areas, being able to rush the passer, which I feel like I can help him.
All right, so that was Bengali Kamara talking a little bit about how he might fit into the 3-3-5. I know we're going to listen a little bit more later from Monkel Goodwin. Do you know how to say it?
I believe it's Goodwin.
Goodwin from Alabama, who also talks a little bit about being able to do both. It seems like, and this was one of the things that we kind of talked about beforehand of like, what do we want to ask? We were trying to kind of suss out, like, did they?
There's 20 guys here. We can't interview everybody about everything. Let's make some notes here.
Right. I mean, we were trying to figure out, like, did they recruit these guys with the idea that they're going to be running the 3-3-5 or keep doing the multiple thing that they did this past year where they're kind of 4-2-5, 3-3-5, depending on the scenario. Right now, it sounds like the latter, right? Is that what you gathered?
I kind of got that too. And again, we're 5 weeks away from the first day of spring practice. They're not even allowed on the field right now. So take everything with a grain of salt, of course, this time of year. But I don't envision a world where they just completely ditch the 4-2-5. That's been Clayton White's thing since he got here. I just don't see a scenario where it just makes sense to completely get rid of that. But also, you'd be foolish to watch the last 4.5 games of last year and what they did in the 3-3-5 and just get rid of that, especially with Bam Martin-Scott back, who you kind of think is a centerpiece of that.
Yeah, well, and I think when we look at the portal and some of these guys that we're talking about, including Kamara, they picked up even more talent in that linebacker room. They got some big boys to play that like sort of hybrid DT, DE outside lineman, including Goodwin, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit. To me, it seems like they're setting up on running it a little bit more. I mean, I'm
kind of with you, but I don't think you're going to completely just chuck the 4-2-5 in the garbage can.
No, why would you? Especially if you already have a lot of guys in the building that know what they're doing there. Just makes you more multiple, which I think is always a good thing. But in general, I feel like really cautiously optimistic about the front 7 or so, front 6, 7, depending on what scheme they're in. And Kamara, I think, plays a pretty big role there. Another thing that he talked a little bit about was just like, if you haven't seen him play before, what to expect, and his pass rushing ability, I think is something that's going to be a big deal here. And really in general, I think that's something that the staff tried to emphasize in the portal, because that's not something that was a strength for you really over the last 2 seasons, but especially last year. So, I mean, we're going to talk about Edmond here in a little bit, but the mixture between your defensive end talent, obviously Dylan Stewart coming in as well, and your new linebacker talent with what's coming back, I think it's not crazy to think that you're going to have a better pass rush this coming year.
I think you should. You should expect to. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but like I said, adding a 5-star talent, even as a true freshman, that does significantly change the way you feel about things. At least in my opinion, Gilbert Edmond back, who we're going to talk about in a second, very experienced pass rusher, and obviously, I guess doesn't know the 3-3-5, but knows the 4-2-5, knows Clayton White's kind of what his defense is about. And Kyle Kennard, who we talked to for a little bit yesterday too. I think that's going to be a a decent add for this group too, coming in from Georgia Tech.
I agree. So I'm going to let two clips play back to back. The first one is Buddy Mack, and it's more just like a nice stroll down memory lane for those of you thinking about better times here in February 2024 for Gamecock football, because he talked about how he grew up a South Carolina fan and was at a game that I was actually at, which was 20.
A game y'all will like. We'll just let the clip run.
Yeah. And then after that, I'm just going to let it play right into Edmond so we can talk a little bit more defense. But I did think you guys would enjoy the Buddy Mack clip. So, and by the way, Buddy Mack, that's the safety out of Pitt. I believe technically a preferred walk-on. We'll see.
They listed him as a DB on his like little note card or whatever they had there yesterday. But I'm under the impression he can also play safety.
Yeah. So here's that.
To the quarterback and get TFLs, we want to stop the run.
The Clemson game, it wasn't here. It was at Clemson, actually.
Where Clowney had like 4 or 5 sacks.
And DJ Swearinger hit Andre.
Yeah, you were at that game?
Yes, sir.
Nice. That's pretty cool. This is kind of a dream come true for you then?
Yes, sir.
Great.
I think I reached out to my position coach,
Gilbert,
and then I think he talked to Beamer about it, and Beamer called me, and then we just spoke about the process of how everything will go and stuff like that, and just where my head at, and where his head at.
Has it been about what you expected coming back?
It's been even better. You know what I'm saying? Just the guys that we have on this team, just being with them the last couple of weeks, seeing the type of athletes and the type of competitors they are, has been a joy.
What did you?
All right, so that was Gilbert Edmond talking a little bit about his tangled path back to South Carolina, I think. You talked a little bit more. Yeah, that was one of the longer interviews, so that's a good one.
There was
to
a
check
lot
out
of interest
later.
in him, understandably so.
Yeah, that's a good one to check out later if you're a premium subscriber and all. But what was your take, I guess, on his journey away, his journey back? I know that's kind of a weird scenario, but it seems like handled it very maturely. And I know that that's something that Beamer talked about whenever he was reintroducing him, was like he did it the right way. And in this like transfer portal era, I don't know, maybe this is gonna happen sometimes, and this is why you don't burn bridges and relationships on either side, if you're the coach or if you're the player.
Yeah, I think what you just said lines up with my take there, which is that his story, his retelling of events, we were kind of asking yesterday how this all came together, very much matched up with what Shane Beamer told us a couple of weeks ago, that he kind of left for personal reasons, some family in Florida, all that stuff, but he just didn't feel right. He wanted to come back. I thought him saying that South Carolina was better than he remembered it was interesting, just because obviously last year didn't go the way anybody wanted it to, and he was coming off of a very good year at South Carolina, an 8-4 team, 8-5, I guess, with the bowl game. But yeah, I think that kind of is speaking to what you said. And also he said what Beamer said, that it wasn't a surefire thing. Shane didn't just say come back. Like someone asked him, I think the question was did you have a moment where you told your teammates? And he said, well, some of them already knew because Shane talked to all the team leaders first before they were going to let me back. So I talked to some of them, or some of them already knew before I told them, and the rest of them I was able to tell, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I also found that comment about the team looking better or stronger or whatever it was than when he left interesting, and I think I agree. Even though obviously record-wise that 2022 season went very well, especially with the way that it ended. I think from a depth and across the board talent standpoint, you're probably better off right now in February 2024 than you were December 2022 or whatever. Maybe it's still, yet to be determined if you have some of those impact guys, if Lenore Sellers is going to step up and be as good as Rattler became, if you're going to have a clear wide receiver one this year. I think that there are still gaps, and obviously there's going to be another portal period as well. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you disagree with his assessment?
I'm not entirely sure, because I think you did have more NFL talent on that 2022 team between, especially on the defense, Cam Smith, Darius Rush right there to start at corner. Zach Pickens in the middle. I'm going to say no because I think you had more high-end talent, but I think the depth right now is much better than when Gil Revin left. He still had a lot of the Muschamp players who are still kind of cycling through the program in 2022. I'm just kind of sitting on the fence with that answer, but
no, that's a good point. I think that maybe the upside isn't quite as high, but the stability might be a little higher.
Yeah.
Let's
should we get to Lenore Sellers or the quarterback battle? Speaking of what you're just talking about.
I have a couple more before that. Jared Brown was next up. That's speaking of who is our wide receiver one. That would be my early guess, unless Nicholas Harbor takes a huge step forward or something. So that's Coastal Carolina wide receiver Jared Brown, and here's what he had to say. Oh, I didn't share my screen, so he's just playing in my ears right now. Here we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, obviously leading wide receiver for the Chanticleers last year. I think has a lot of upside even at the next level. And here's Jared Brown.
Coastal. We did move around a lot. We moved myself in the slot and outside, different places. So Coach Logan said that he could do some of the same things. So that's something I want to come into.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting, a little insight on how they might use Jared Brown. Like he said, he was kind of a multiple guy at Coastal, played outside, played inside. He's kind of a tweener body type wise too, like 5'11", 6 foot, 180, 190, pretty fast, but not like track speed, but just like a really solid receiver all around. And I could see him kind of developing into that like first read, go to it's 3rd and 7. Who am I looking for? I'm looking for Jared Brown sort of guy.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that about the height because I think that's kind of my takeaway with this receiver room starting to look around a little bit. Jared Brown's 5'9". Gage Larvadain, the receiver from Miami, Ohio, who I also talked to for quite a bit, actually. He was a pretty good interview with STB in there for subscribers. He's 5'10". I'm blanking what Amari Huggins Bruce is right now, but
he's around there.
5'11". So, yeah, you're going to have one of the shorter receiving groups in the SEC, I think. I mean, other than Harbor, obviously, has got the size and the frame, which is just kind of different. Like, you don't really have a jump ball receiver. You don't really have a guy you'd expect to high point the ball, maybe. You're going to have to kind of do it a little bit differently. And it can work, but I think it's just interesting, the kind of the body types and kind of what this receiver room is kind of trended into, whether that was on purpose or not.
Yeah, and it can work, but I agree that it's going to require some scheming and it's going to require some accuracy from Lenoris Sellers, which if there was one thing that I guess I would have said was something he struggled with a little bit in high school, it was that accuracy. I mean, he throws a beautiful deep ball. It was more the intermediate stuff, but so that will be interesting. I think he's developed that over time, at least the little bit that we've seen. So maybe it won't even be as much of an issue, but I think you can definitely make it work, but you don't have the Xavier Legette that you can just like chuck it up to, and he's probably going to come down with it. Unless Nicholas Harbor realizes that he's 6'5", 225 and starts using his body that way, which I think is definitely a possibility. By the way, he's crushing it in track right now. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff, but he just ran a personal best last weekend, finished like 3rd in the 200 or something as a true freshman. Pretty impressive stuff. All right, one more before we get to the quarterback. I did have a little bit from Monkel Goodwine, just to kind of finish up that defensive front conversation. Those of you that don't know who this is, he was at Alabama and didn't really get on the field a ton, but when we were breaking down, I guess, the addition of him, seems like a lot of upside, still a young guy. And I don't know, if Bama wants you probably have some talent in there somewhere. So, let's hear what he had to say about the scheme and how he fits into it.
You guys played 4-2-5 and 3-3-5 last year. What did you see on tape from South Carolina? Where do you think you kind of fit in here?
I feel like playing at D tackle with these guys, especially, last year, they ain't really had too much depth. I think that I can bring more depth to the D lineman, to D line with me and DeAndre Jules is coming in. We've been working real hard, and I just feel like we can make a huge impact on just rotating in and off the field. So.
I know you're not on the field for another 5-6 weeks, but do you feel more comfortable in a 3-down lineman or 4 for you specifically?
To be honest with you, I'm comfortable with anything. I can do it all. If we got to do 3 down 3 linemen, 4 down 3 linemen, then I'm down for it.
How would you describe your game? If someone hadn't watched you before, how would you describe yourself as a player?
I feel like I'm really good at the run game and pass rush. Whenever I get the opportunity on a one-on-one, I feel like I'm going to win it.
All right. Well, if you're a South Carolina fan, you certainly are encouraged by his confidence, right? It sounds like he believes that he can come in and make a
I want to start this impact. With a question for you. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but speaking of good wine, is defensive tackle the deepest group on the roster position-wise?
Yeah, I think so. I think it probably was before the portal period, and then I think you added some really solid pieces. Goodwine, he mentioned DeAndre Jules, and even some of the outside pieces like Kennard and Edmond. If you are playing 3 through 5, I mean, yes, I think so. The question is just, I don't know. I think figuring out the rotation is going to be kind of a big challenge,
especially if you are playing that 3-3-5.
Yeah, because there's only
Tonka, Boogie, and TJ all back.
Yeah, there's only so many, I guess, mouths to feed, and as in terms of people that can make an impact. Also, I think though, if you look at the scholarship breakdown, a lot of the guys that you just mentioned are nearing the end of their eligibility. You signed a couple guys that have quite a few years of eligibility left. So if you can convince them to kind of buy in to the system and take a year to sit and learn and get a few snaps per game or whatever, I think you're kind of set up for the future as well.
Yeah, I agree there. I think you really like the look of that. If there's one position group you feel great, I don't want to even say like perfect about, because all these guys can improve. You weren't the best run stopping team in the country or something, but you've got enough bodies there, and you've got enough, especially college football experience there, to feel pretty good about your D tackles.
Let's finish up our discussion on some of these transfer guys with quarterback. So Robbie Ashford, obviously one of the last additions in the class out of Auburn. We were kind of wondering how they were going to thread the needle between not upsetting Lenore Sellers, who is probably the presumed starter, but also bringing in some depth because you really didn't have any after the departures of some other guys. So let's listen to what Ashford's mindset was as he's coming into South Carolina.
I said I had a lot of schools that, hey, you can come here and be the guy day one. I mean, from the time you step on, but I didn't want that. I didn't want anything handed to me. And just from watching the film D-Lo put up and just the things he does, I mean, there's certain things that he showed me on my visit that I've never seen in my life. And just to see that, I'm like, man, that's crazy. Like, and it's some of the greats doing it. I'm like, I've never thought of this, never been told this. So it's just little things like that. I mean, it just shows great development. Just to see how the Spencer development too, from 2022 to 2023, just what he's doing now. I mean, that's a credit to D-Lo and to him. I mean, it shows D-Lo knows what he's doing. I mean, he's one of the best in the business. So.
All right, and that was Robbie Ashford talking a little bit about D-Lo, who is Dowell Loggins, of course, offensive coordinator. He kind of brought up a point that I don't think that we've talked enough about, which is Rattler's development from 2022, where he had a pretty good season, to 2023, and how much of that is due to Loggins and his tutelage and his scheme. What do you think? What was that the difference in Rattler having like a okay season with some pretty big wins to one of the most significant statistical seasons in Gamecock history last year?
I think it goes both ways. It goes to Rattler, but also for sure goes to Dowell Loggins. You look at his track record with quarterbacks, his NFL time was with KJ Jefferson in Arkansas too. He got better when he was with Loggins. I think there's definitely something to be said there. I think the way not just Robbie Ashford talked about him, but the way recruits talk about him, the way Dante Reno's talked about Loggins. I know with you a couple times on our website. I think it absolutely plays, and I think you're right. It probably should be discussed more. And it sounds like that's kind of what Robbie Ashford wanted to come to South Carolina for. I wrote about the quarterback situation in general. Got some comments from players on both Lenoris and Robbie yesterday. It's on the website if you're subscribed. But there's one quote in there, I won't spoil it, you should go read it, about Ashford kind of and development specifically and why that was important to him.
Yeah, and you mentioned KJ Jefferson. I mean, now between Sellers and Ashford, I think you very much have that prototype. And you have some depth that can do some of those similar things. Maybe not to that level. I think it's too early to say one way or another, but I don't know. I think you should, again, it's another one of those, like, be cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of talent in that room. It sounds like they're bought into Loggins and his vision. And if we're giving him credit for some of Rattler's development, maybe there's reasons to be optimistic that he can develop both of those guys and make it work. And honestly, I think if his ideal is like a KJ Jefferson type, that the two he has now actually might fit that better than Rattler even did.
Yeah, I think the Ashford thing is so interesting just because you watch him, you look at the numbers, like obviously he can run, obviously he's got yards, he's thrown touchdowns. The accuracy is just the one thing that you look and go, well, that doesn't make much sense. There's no way around it. He was at 49% for his college career, and that's over 22 games. That's not a small sample size with less than half your passes completed. That kind of feels like a more extreme version of Lenoris Sellers, right? Like we talked about his accuracy. Like he just kind of feels like Sellers, but to the nth degree. And whether that's a good thing or not, I guess it's kind of up to Dowell Loggins in development. But I think that's the one thing that if you can just get some accuracy there, you've got a very, very someone who's going to genuinely push Sellers for the job, not just here to make up the numbers.
No, I agree. And you obviously have to have a better completion percentage than 49% in the SEC, but it's hard not to salivate a little bit at the numbers. In 22 SEC games, he's had 21 total touchdowns, most of those on the ground, 2,685 all-purpose yards. He's a weapon. Maybe an unpolished weapon, maybe one that you're a little afraid of handling, I guess. But could be a destructive one as well. I mean, I don't know. Not just destructive is the wrong word because it implies negative. But for a weapon, you want a weapon to be destructive. So.
I think at the very least, like absolute minimum, and I would expect him to have more than this, he can be the Lenoris role from last year where like it's 3rd and 2, we need to run for a first down. You can bring a package in or goal line stuff.
It very much feels like short yardage situation.
Yeah.
Especially if Lenoris is playing really well early on and you realize pretty quickly that you don't want that guy. You want to limit the amount of times that guy gets hit.
Yep.
Throw in the other 6'3" guy that's already proven that he can run against SEC defenses for sure. Any other football notes, I guess, from yesterday? Like I said, we'll have a few more articles on the site, and I'm going to have that full just like dump of interviews for premium subscribers on GamecockScoop.com later.
I think that about covers the high points from football yesterday. There's a lot of stuff from those interviews. If you're a junkie for football, if the basketball, baseball doesn't do it for you, you want to hear about some of these players' stories behind their tattoos and what they like to eat and what they do away from football, and some of them what brought them to South. Just all kinds of stuff in there from most of the transfers. Almost an hour worth of interviews, like Caleb said, if you're subscribed.
Yeah, and a lot of those are completely exclusive. The way that it worked yesterday, like there might be some other sites that were standing around at the same time as you were, but over the course of 20 different people or whatever, you got.
I'd say probably more than half of those were one-on-one interviews.
Yeah, so you got some unique the quotes there. So definitely something to check out. If you're not a subscriber, now's a great time to join right here in the off season as we start to get cranked up towards spring ball. Continue to talk about the 2 elite basketball programs that you have right now. And finally, baseball is starting next week as well. Yeah. Pretty high expectations for them. I know you had a quick press conference with Mark Kingston earlier this week. There's been some scrimmages Any quick notes on that? We'll do a deep dive on baseball
Yeah.
next week as a little teaser for you guys. But any quick notes on where they're at right now, February 9th?
I still kind of generally side with this offense is going to be ridiculous, like maybe the best in the country, top 5 for sure. Like the power, the numbers, what's seen in the scrimmages, the depth. They're going to have too many hitters, so they're going to have to rotate some guys, and it's not a bad problem to have. But you're 1 or 2 pitchers developing away from something pretty special here. If everybody can stay healthy, but that's a big if.
Do you feel like that those pitchers exist on the roster, or is it just going to be you're going to have to outscore some teams?
I kind of lean towards the second, but also I haven't seen enough of all the transfers yet. You have a lot of new arms, especially in the bullpen. I think it's going to take some time through non-con play to figure out what roles are best. But you got Eli Jones and Matthew Becker back, plus Roman Kimball. So I think that's 3 starters right there you feel pretty good about, assuming Kimball gets fully back from the Tommy John and can get into game action, which he's on track to do.
Yeah, and we still sort of feel like Kingston's on the warmish seat. Right?
I would call it warm,
Yeah.
just the way the buyout went, how they didn't. I have a big baseball preview coming if you're subscribed. It's a 2-parter, maybe like Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday next week. But I talk about that a little bit in there too. So if you're not subscribed, you can get my thoughts on that situation too. If you hit the button.
Like I said, now's the time. This is where it comes. Yeah, I mean, just a quick note on that, I guess. Like, there's a bunch of Gamecock sites out there. They're all great. We love them. Some people have really big bloated staffs. We don't have that, but I think we make up for it in quality on GamecockScoop.com. So definitely add us to our rotation if you never checked us out. All right, we'll be back here next week for the GamecockScoop.com podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you.